Welcome everybody to this video where I talk about the main problems with the 2025 NFL schedule, not from a subjective point of view in terms of, oh, this team got way too many primetime games or this team got way too tough of a schedule, but in terms of objective things that don't seem to make a whole lot of sense on the surface, that seem grossly unfair, and that seem like no one thought about this for more than 5 seconds. There are a lot of logistical flaws with this schedule that I don't think the NFL took into account that could be worrisome down the road, and we will address those in this video. But before I begin, if you are new to the channel, I appreciate all of you guys tuning in. We talk about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL all the time on this channel with a new video every single day and a new live stream every single day. So if you're just joining me for the first time, make sure that you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel or a single time that we go live. I did videos like this on JG9 News last year, but decided to combine it all into one video on the main channel here. So that is what we're going to do. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 main problems with the NFL schedule, once again, from an objective point of view, in terms of things that don't make a lot of sense and that were overlooked by AWS and the people designing the schedule. The first thing that needs to be talked about is the dilemma of teams playing each other twice in a 3-week stretch. Amazingly enough, last year, as many gripes as I had about the schedule, it wasn't that bad. Now, it was still pretty bad. You had 3 instances last year where a team played each other twice in a 3-week stretch during the regular season. You have the Cardinals and the Seahawks doing it. You have the Bills and the Patriots doing it, week 16 and week 18, and the Steelers and the Browns doing it. Now, if I was running the schedule, it would be like the Premier League, where you play each divisional team once in the first half and once in the second half. But at a bare minimum, the thing where you play a team twice in 3 weeks and knock out both games in a 3-week stretch needs to go. And somehow this year, it happened not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 times that we see a team playing each other twice in a 3-week stretch. Again, if this was the way I was doing it, I would make it so that you play each team once before the trade deadline and once after, because the whole idea of the trade deadline is what do we need to do to be able to compete with the other teams in our division. And a lot of teams do not know what they need to do because they haven't played that team in that division yet. That's the whole purpose of pushing the trade deadline backward, is to incentivize trades so people know what they need. And it's stuff they know what you need when you haven't played that team yet. And there are teams like the Jaguars that only play one division game before the trade deadline, but twice in a 3-week stretch is where it gets absolutely ridiculous. The Philadelphia Eagles fall victim to this twice. They play the New York Giants in week 4 and then in week 6. Remember the NFC Championship last year between the Eagles and the Commanders? Well, we are not getting that until week 16, and then they'll play again in week 18. You also have in the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Baltimore Ravens in weeks 13 and weeks 15. The Buccaneers and the Panthers in the NFC South playing each other's weeks 16 and 18, and the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers playing weeks 14 and 16. It does not make any sense why teams play each other twice in a 3-week stretch. You would think it'd be very easy to outlaw this in the formula that the NFL comes up with when they were designing the schedule. Alas, that has clearly not happened. We are left with somehow more games of twice in a 3-week stretch than last year, which is just absolutely bizarre to me. Speaking of bizarre, there is a scheduling controversy that could take place in week 5 involving the Seattle Seahawks. And that takes me to the second point, which is the fact that the NFL clearly has no idea what it's doing when it comes to scheduling around Major League Baseball, which could cause a major problem down the road. In week 5, the Seattle Seahawks play at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 4 o'clock Eastern time, so 1 o'clock local time. There is a problem with that, and the problem is that the ALDS is taking place at the same time. The ALDS is set to start Saturday game 1, and then Sunday would be game 2. The Mariners play at T-Mobile Park right across the street. They share the same parking lot, which means if the Mariners host game 2, you are completely and utterly screwed. Now, right now, the Mariners are leading the AL West. I don't know if that's going to last, but if the Mariners do host a playoff game, and there is a chance that they do, that could be a major, major problem for the Seattle Seahawks, because it's not like you can play the Mariners at 5 o'clock local time or 4 o'clock local time and the Seahawks at 1, because it would be a parking lot nightmare. Now, to be fair, the Baltimore Ravens have the same issue with the Houston Texans in Week 5, because they play at home and they share the same parking lot as the Baltimore Orioles. You might remember the whole controversy that took place during the 2013 season when the Orioles had a home game against the Chicago White Sox that they did not move, and as a result, Week 1, the Ravens had to travel on the road to play the Denver Broncos for the first game of the season instead of raising the Super Bowl banner on opening night. But it's not a huge deal because the Ravens have a 1 o'clock game, so you can clear out the lot and have the Orioles play at night. That is not a problem. That has been done before. But the fact that the Seattle Seahawks are playing a game at 4 o'clock local time, it would be almost impossible to play this game against the Buccaneers at its scheduled time if the Mariners are in the ALDS and are hosting, because of the fact that they share the same parking lot. I have no idea why the league doesn't build in contingencies when it comes to teams sharing stadiums or ballparks or parking lots, I should say. It's not really a thing with sharing stadiums anymore. It hasn't happened since the Raiders moved out. But it doesn't make any sense why you don't build in contingencies when two teams are sharing the same parking lot. Have the Seahawks play a divisional opponent that week so you could flip-flop the dates if that became an issue. So as an example, let's say have them play the 49ers Week 5. If there is an instance where the Mariners look like they could host the ALDS game 2, you can easily flip-flop the dates and have the Seahawks play the Niners in San Fran Week 5, and then the Seahawks play in Seattle Week 12. But to do it like this, where you're playing a team that you only play one time, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, especially because there are not too many backup options that work from a competitive standpoint if that happens. You can't play the game super late at night. Theoretically, you could do an 8 o'clock local start time, have the Mariners play at 1 o'clock locally, a la what happened with the Raiders-Chargers game in 2013, where the Oakland A's were playing in the playoffs, and they had to reconfigure the Coliseum, and to do that, they moved Raiders-Chargers to late Sunday night at 11:35 Eastern start time. But that at least made some sense because the Raiders and the Chargers are two West Coast teams, so it's a pretty reasonable time for those fans. When you played the Buccaneers, a lot different, because the game will not end until 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning local time for Bucs fans, and that's not good. They might say, why not play the game Monday night if that's an issue? Well, that's also not ideal, because you're already on a short week the following week, and both the Buccaneers and the Seahawks have to fly across the country afterwards in one of the longest domestic flights of the season. It is always tough to go from Washington State to Florida. That is furthest. The distance between the two is the furthest out there. Seattle to Miami is the furthest flight. Go from Seattle to Florida, not exactly a walk in the park in terms of flying. The Buccaneers travel back to Tampa. The Seahawks travel to Jacksonville the following week. So if the Mariners do make it, the NFL left itself no wiggle room whatsoever, and it will be very interesting to see what the NFL decides to do if that dilemma happens. In terms of other things, staying in the NFC West, I do not understand whatsoever what the NFL was thinking when it came to the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Indianapolis Colts on Monday Night Football in Week 16. It's not necessarily the game itself, it's the fact that this game is pretty much impossible to flex out, and there is a chance that this game is not that good. There's a mantra that bad teams stay bad, and that you have to earn the right to prove that you are good. You have to prove the opposite. You have to prove that you are not bad. Otherwise, you just stay bad. And the reason I say that is because we can predict what teams are going to bounce back and whatnot, what teams are going to be the surprise Cinderellas, what teams are going to turn it around. But at the end of the day, last season, from November on Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football, there was only one non-divisional, non-flex game on the schedule in prime time between two teams that were below 500 the year before. The Atlanta Falcons and the Las Vegas Raiders were both below 500 in 2023, and the NFL gave them a late primetime game in 2024. Both teams ended the 2024 season below 500. In other words, they were two bad teams in 2023. The NFL threw them a primetime game against each other late in the year, and the game was a dud in terms of the standings and just in terms of an overall enjoyment standpoint. as both teams ended the year below 500. In 2023, you saw the same thing. From November on Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football, the non-divisional, non-flex game on the schedule, and by non-flexed, I mean a game that wasn't flexed into the spot. So Jets-Raiders was projected to be the Sunday night game that week in November. Both teams were below 500 in 2022. Both teams finished 2023 below 500. In other words, you're not really going to expect a good game on paper late in the season between two teams that were below 500 the previous year. Generally speaking, bad teams stay bad. I'm not saying the Niners can't turn it around. I'm not saying the Colts can't turn it around, but it is unlikely. And both the Niners and the Colts were below 500 last season. The Niners were 6-11. The Colts were 8-9. Now, there is another game like this on the schedule. The Niners play the Panthers week 12. At least that has a chance of getting flexed out. But the problem with this is that this game in week 16 cannot get flexed. It is highly unlikely that this game gets flexed. So if you're going to take a gamble on a game like this, you want to have good options just in case this game is a dud in terms of the standings. And sure enough, there are no real contingencies. There are no safeguards here for the NFL. The problem is that the following week, week 17, is Christmas. And I bring that up because you're not going to have a team play Monday Night Football and then play on Thursday. You're not going to have teams play on 2 days rest. That is not possible. What that means is that you can't flex Chargers-Cowboys because of the Monday-Thursday turnaround for the Cowboys. You can't flex Jaguars-Broncos. Now, I think that game is going to mean a whole lot, but because the Broncos play on Thursday for Christmas, you can't have them play on Monday. Chiefs-Titans, I'm not expecting that game to mean a whole lot, but you can't flex that game because Monday-Thursday turnaround for the Chiefs. Vikings-Giants, you can't flex that game in because of the Monday-Thursday turnaround for the Vikings. And you can't flex Steelers-Lions because of the Monday-Thursday turnaround for the Lions since there's a triple header on Christmas. That means that of the 11 afternoon games on Sunday that you could theoretically flex in, there's only 6 possible options to flex into that window if Niners-Colts is a dud. And that's before CBS and Fox each get to protect their marquee game. Usually, you see CBS protect their best game that week, Fox protect their best game that week, and then the NFL can decide which game to put in if they want to flex. That's why you never see America's Game of the Week getting flexed to Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football or anything along those lines. So you're left with scraps of scraps. There's only going to be 4 possible options of those games that can get flexed into Week 16 Monday night if Colts 49ers turns out to be a dud of a game because either the Colts, the Niners, or both of those teams do not play well in 2025. And the NFL gave themselves no protection whatsoever in order to make this work. If you want to do a game like this and take a gamble week 15, all right. Week 16, I've got a problem with it just based on history, with bad teams usually staying bad, the history of below 500 non-divisional games in prime time in previous years, and the fact that there are no safeguards whatsoever. Speaking of the 49ers, this takes me to point number 4. The San Francisco 49ers got completely hosed on their schedule when it comes to time zones. And I don't know how nobody at the NFL picked up on this because this doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Changing time zones frequently can be very tough on the body. If you've ever flown, you've ever traveled across the country, you know that. When you change time zones, you get out of routines. It gets very hard to get into a rhythm. Think about how your body adjusts when you go from Pacific time to Eastern time or vice versa. Well, keep this in mind. The San Francisco 49ers have a 9-week stretch where they will never play in the same time zone across the 9 weeks. And they have a 12-game stretch where they will never play in the same time zone in back-to-back weeks. Their bodies will constantly be adjusting. They're changing time zones on a weekly basis. Here is what I mean. In week 5, the Niners play the Rams in Los Angeles. That's on Pacific time. Week 6, they play at Tampa Bay. That's Eastern time. Week 7, they're back at home against the Falcons. That's Pacific time. Week 8, they play on the road against the Texans. That's Central time. Week 9, on the road against the Giants. That's Eastern time. Week 10, at home against the Rams. That's Pacific time. Week 11, on the road against the Cardinals. That's Mountain time. Week 12 against the Panthers at home. That's Pacific time. Week 13 on the road against the Browns, that's Eastern time. That's 9 straight weeks where they're changing time zones. Now they get it by week 14, but week 15, they're at home against the Titans. That's Pacific time. So 10 straight games, never the same time zone twice in a row. Week 16, they're on the road against the Colts in Indianapolis. That's Eastern time. And week 17, they're at home against the Chicago Bears, which is Pacific time. That is a 12-game stretch where they are never in the same time zone in back-to-back weeks. That is a massive toll on the body. And again, I don't know why no one at the NFL caught this, because something like this in terms of a stretch seems absolutely absurd and seems like a hindrance on the players' bodies. I'm not sure how they're going to pull this off, but it's something that never should have happened in the first place. Obviously, when you play in the Pacific time zone or the Mountain time zone, there are not a whole lot of teams compared to Central time and Eastern time. So you're going to have some stretches where you're changing time zones every now and then, but not this many. Not this many games in a row where you're not playing back-to-back weeks in the same time zone. That just seems absolutely absurd to me. And speaking of absurd, I'm not sure the NFL recognizes their own product when it comes to the final point that I'm about to make, and that is the Monday night doubleheader. Now, by this, I'm not talking about the game that is on ESPN and then another game on ABC, with the games taking place either at the same time or spread 1 hour apart. What I'm talking about is the bizarre situation taking place in Week 2. In Week 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play the Houston Texans at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And then the Los Angeles Chargers take on the Las Vegas Raiders at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Both games are on ESPN. Now, the NFL used to have these Monday night doubleheaders to kick off the season. You might remember Week 1, they used to have those on ESPN where you play one game early of the night, one game with West Coast teams late in the night. We saw it last time with Broncos Titans back in 2020. So I don't have a problem with this necessarily, having the doubleheader. The idea of the doubleheader is not what bothers me. What bothers me is that both games are on ESPN. If you notice the times, 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock, you might notice, oh, there might be some overlap here. The average length of an NFL game takes 3 hours and 12 minutes to complete. What this tells me is that the NFL, when making this schedule, had no idea whatsoever about how their product worked. Because when you have a game starting at 7 and a game starting at 10, that's a 3-hour window. The average length takes 3:12 to complete. There's a reason why the doubleheader, it's 1 o'clock and 4:25. There's a reason why they changed it from 1 o'clock to 4:15 to 1 o'clock to 4:25. It used to be 1 and 4:15, then they realized there was too much overlap. 3 hours, 15 minutes is cutting it a little close, so you're putting it at 4:25 Eastern time instead. You're going to give it another 10 minutes, and that should usually be enough unless the game goes into overtime. The problem here is that 3-hour window, there will be some overlap, and the games are on the same network, which could be a major problem. That could mean one of two things. The game starts in a double box, which makes it very hard to see depending on what TV you're on. We could have a Heidi moment where ESPN flips off the game and tells people to tune into ABC to watch the conclusion, which would lead to chaos for sports bars and other people, depending on when the switch is made, if it's made during a break in the action, or something along those lines. You could start one of the games on ESPN2. I suppose that's not the end of the world, but again, think about the sports bars and think about the fact that none of the sports bars will have ESPN2 on. They're going to have ABC and ESPN on during this time, and to get them to flip over to ESPN2 could be a bit interesting, to say the least. I don't know why, when two games are the same network, you give 3 hours of room. That is not a lot of room whatsoever. There will be some overlap unless Bucs-Texans is one of the quickest games ever. The second game needed to start at 10:25 in order to make this work seamlessly. Or you could start Bucs-Texans at 6:50 and have Chargers-Raiders start at 10:05, 10:10, something along those lines. But to only give 3 hours seems like a gross misunderstanding of how your product works. And I'll be interested to see what happens there when Bucs-Texans inevitably runs long. Are there as many issues with the schedule this year on the surface as there were last year? No, we're not seeing anything like the Steelers and the Bears last season, where they played all their divisional games past week 11. We're not seeing anything along those lines. And yes, there are some gripes that you can make with this schedule, but overall it is better than last year's. it is still not very good when you look at how many teams are playing each other twice in a 3-week stretch. When you look at some easily avoidable dilemmas that the NFL clearly did not take into account, and some of the lack of contingencies in place for some of the lesser primetime games on the surface. There are some teams that definitely got hosed compared to others, just in terms of logistical things, such as the Raiders having 3 opponents coming off a bye week when no other team has anywhere close to that, and the 49ers, like I mentioned, with the time zone issue earlier. But what are your thoughts on the NFL schedule for your team in general, the primetime slate, whatever you want to talk about? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I appreciate all you guys tuning in. We'll have some more history videos coming out in the coming days about the history of the NFL and the NFL schedule and some weird controversies that have taken place during that. But I appreciate all you guys being here. Thank you guys for tuning in. And regardless of your thoughts on the schedule, I can't wait for the 2025 season to kick off officially for the regular season in just about 4 months' time.